we've got a speaker here who's got a great deal of experience in the computer graphics world, CGI. James, do we have our next guest with us? I'd like to bring in Steve Williams if he's there. Steve, hi. You're muted at the moment, but if you're there, I'd very much looking forward to welcoming you to the stage. Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm here. Just a second. Let's make sure I get it. Yeah, I'm here.
There you go. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. I'm good. It's wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Where are you at the moment, by the way?
I'm in north of San Francisco in California right now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us. It's a morning over there where you are. I'm gonna recede into the background here. You've got a ton of experience to share, but we'll ask folk for questions. So please do, folks, drop some questions into the room. I'll have some of my own, I'm sure. Steve, sure. If you want to say a few words, and then just shout when you want me to come back in, and I'll come in and curate some of those questions for you.
Sure. I was just going to show a couple of things. First of all, hopefully there's going to be, or I know there'll be some latency. I think in my past, I was a chief animator at Lucasfilm, Industrial Light and Magic, for 10 years. I'm an animator by trade and a computer engineer as well. So it was kind of a good combination. So I joined ILM in 1988, and I was a chief animator on The Abyss, Terminator 2, Jurassic Park, Mask, Star Wars, a lot of other ones and stuff. And so, one of the reasons I keep on getting asked about, the T-Rex, of which the story on that is that it was supposed to be stop motion, go motion. And I said, I can build this whole thing in data. I just come off building the T1000 for Terminator 2. So I used sort of an archaic old form of Alias called Alias version 2.4.1, which is a forward kinematic system. I posted a lot of stuff on LinkedIn about this. So there's a short little documentary done a couple of years ago. This kind of exemplifies, what we had done on the Jurassic thing. So I'm going to do a screen share with everybody on that, if that's okay, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this, and I'll come back after that. So let's just have a little look at that. Hopefully you enjoy this.
Everybody was stunned about the work in the film. All the light bulbs that went off in everybody's mind that, oh my God, we've never seen this before.
It's sort of like splitting the atom. Once it happens, the industry shifts and everybody starts talking.
Everybody wanted to see the movie. Everyone was excited about the movie. Everyone wanted to know how we made the movie. It was just unbelievable. It was one of those movies that became a phenomenon. It changed pop culture.
Phil Tippett, in a moment, realized what he was doing was obsolete. Stan Winston saw at that moment that technology was going to begin to encroach on what it was he did. It was clear to everybody that the movie industry was changing. ILM was in a building that they're not in anymore, but it was basically a warehouse building that was in San Rafael. It was always interesting because when you took people to ILM, I think they had in their mind that they were going to see something that was like magic. And in fact, it was a lot of guys sitting in front of computers.
ILM was not really a production facility. That's what I love about it. It was really a lab, We're inventing, we were experimenting with things. It was total Frankenstein shop, but digital.
To us, it was just exciting. I mean, to us, it was kind of that rush of, we're doing something that's so incredible that nobody's seen before.
It was a pretty small cadre of people that had worked on shows like we were working on and had done the kinds of things we had done.
We've done a few really neat things. We've done SHERLOCK and The Abyss. And we took on Terminator 2. Nobody saw, when they saw T2, what was actually going on in that show that could be applied to anything. But Stephen came up with the idea of, I think, let's go ahead and let's do Jurassic. The time's right, I have a slot. But he wasn't thinking of CG. Dennis Muren took us all out to a lunch, and he said that Spielberg's coming up with this film, and it's going to be stop motion. Tippett's doing all the work. And it would be possible to add motion blur to the stop motion data. So Mark and I brought it up right away. Why don't we just build the whole damn thing with CG? Oh, no, you can't do it.
I immediately stuck up my arm and said, hey, come on, digital dinosaurs. But it was definitely, we had to evolve to that point. Spielberg, I believe, had already begun the process of designing and building dinosaurs quite some time before with Stan Winston's group. They do amazing animatronic, puppeteering, sculptures, etc. That whole world of physical visual effects.
And we were going to use Phil Tippett, who was considered at the time the best in stop motion
Stop motion essentially is that if you wanted to have a dinosaur walk, you're posing it, you take a picture, then you do the next pose and you take that picture.
But it seemed like an incredible loss opportunity. That here you've got this big film going on, and the fundamental imagery is going to be a process that's sort of, on the verge of being obsolete. I've been pushing for CG for years, but I didn't think we were ready for it. I wasn't sure.
I think the issue in Jurassic Park for everyone was, can you do something that's real, that's alive, that's breathing, that sweats? So there was a lot of doubt about that.
Stop motion was sort of a well-defined process. What Stan was going to do was well-defined. We were just kind of coming in and saying, well, what if we can do this? Wouldn't it make a much more dynamic film?
We told ourselves, if we don't try, we're idiots. Myself and Spaz and others too, we were believers. Like, this is the way to do it.
The boat had left the harbor already, kind of thing. We were doing stop motion, right? We were going to be adding motion blur to it. So I secretly started to build a set of T-Rex bones.
Steve's spirit was a little bit of a rebel. He said, well, let me just try it. I don't care if anybody officially says we can do this. Stefan, let's just do this. And I worked with him doing the part of the lighting and shading and rendering.
That was done after hours, and Spaz did most of the early work entirely himself. He would just talk about it, look for references, look for ideas, talk about what we're trying to do.
A couple of the guys working on it, Mark DePay and Steve Williams, were just saying, no, let's try this. And they were sort of working in the back, and I was saying, guys, don't do this, those my buddies and got the job for everything else, and just let this play out, thinking that eventually there might be a sea change on the show. So I built these set of bones. I had a walk, and I knew I was not going to be allowed to show it. Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall were coming up, and I knew they were coming up on a Monday in November of 1991. They came walking in, and I had it playing on a monitor, and the whole deal changed at that point.
It was immediately very clear that we were going to get realistic movement to these dinosaurs that was going to be far advanced from what we were doing with stop motion.
It looked incredibly fluid, like real bones sort of walking around by themselves.
So the next thing was, well, can we do it with a skinned dinosaur?
My thought was, if we're going to try to really make this work, we need to be able to do the hardest shot we could actually do. Let's just have a locked off camera, this T-Rex big walking toward us with kind of a wide angle lens. We're not hiding anything. It took us a matter of weeks going on for this. And when we looked at this thing, it was like, oh my God, this actually looks real. Tippett didn't really know this was going on. So Dennis had met, with Anlin and said, I got to show you guys this kind of cool test. It was just me and Stan Winston, and we went down and showed it to them, and they just went nuts.
There were about 5 or 6 of us that gathered in the Amblin screening room. And Dennis brought down the film, and it was one of those incredible moments. Every now and then when you're involved in an industry, something happens and you know that it's just incredibly groundbreaking and it's going to change everything. And this was one of those moments. Every single one of us jumped to our feet because we couldn't believe what we were looking at.
And Stan disappeared for like 30 minutes. I still don't know what Stan did for the 30 minutes afterward. But I think what he did was he saw this amazing thing and ran out to the telephone or something. So we got to get into this business, this computer business.
I think everyone's reaction in the room was probably the same. It was like, we're seeing something, special. At that point in time, it dawned on me that, wow, there's nothing that can't be done now. This is truly a game changer.
And once everybody saw that, I think that's when Phil got the phone call and said, no, we're not doing a stop motion anymore. That's what we're going to do, computer graphics.
We moved into guerrilla mode. We started building everything, in computer graphics. And Phil was still kept on because he really was the knowledge when it came to, dinosaur. He'd studied them all his life.
It started out where it was only going to be a few shots. Then it was a few more shots.
By the end of the show, Stephen rewrote the ending of it so that we could do a close-up of a T-Rex, and it takes place in this rotunda with these 2 raptors, and then the T-Rex comes in, it pans down, a raptor jumps on it, it lifts it up. That's the most amazing thing. And we had no idea 2 weeks before that we could even do a shot that close.
I thought it would be a really good movie, but I was blown away how great a movie it was.
I remember the first times when we all saw it and with audience, it was so much fun to just go like this, sit in the front row and just look at people, it
just broke everything open, and suddenly the writers could tell stories they never imagined they could tell. You could do animals, you could do tornadoes, and they looked real for the first time. You could just do anything.
I just think there was an explosion that was visceral in that movie of those dinosaurs coming into our world. And I think that's reflective of the newfound power of creating imagery that was inherent in the computer. After that, there became a real trend towards over-reliance on CG. And I think a lot of the great work that we did got overshadowed. I think it's about 15 minutes of dinosaurs in that whole movie. And 9 of it was done with our practical dinosaurs in one shape or form or another. It's not to take anything away from what great CGI work was done and how groundbreaking and how game-changing that was.
But no one really saw any of this coming, you know. There was just a few of us that really knew it was really time to do it. But we were mavericks at that time. We really thought that always question established system, you know, and had we not done it then, it probably would have happened in 5-6 years.
People did come to industrial light and magic filmmakers when they wanted to do something which had never been done before. And that was very exciting to be at that edge.
It was a special place to be in. It was a very creatively fertile environment. They let us just go nuts. That helped us to be able to do things like Jurassic Park. Myself and Steve in particular, we were just, you know, planting the flag. Come on, guys, this is a chance we can do something unbelievable. That was kind of all we were doing.
You had to be arrogant about it because had we failed, it would have been the end. You know, there was no room for failure at this point. I love the term "you will never." If I listen to "you will never," T-Rex wouldn't have been built. Okay.
Amazing. Yeah, that's.
There are a few films that were quite as large as Jurassic Park.
The reason I showed that. Can you guys hear me okay?
26 years later,
I think we can still hear the a rolling VT from somewhere, actually, Steve.
Examples of movie magic. Jurassic Park is, of course, all about bringing these extinct animals to life, and a lot of that credit goes to the brilliant engineers at ILM and Stanford.
Steve, we can see you, but we can hear the voiceover.
Hold on us is largely due to the assured direction of Steven Spielberg. Jurassic Park is perhaps the greatest visual achievement from our greatest visual storytelling. Today, I want to examine the images directed by Spielberg and captured by cinematographer Dean Cundy, and how dinosaurs were brought to life.
I apologize for that.
No, it's okay, no problem. It's the challenges of doing things remotely. We can hear you again now. That's great. That's great.
Okay, how's that? Sorry about that. Yeah, one of the reasons I decided to show that, right, especially with the venue of this, is that the whole message has always been that, you know, we were always resisted with our ideas, right? And we said, no, this is the way we do it. This is the convention of how we do it, right? So we said, look, I had a very simple policy. Anything on a screen, it's a bathtub full of color ball bearings. Anything is possible. Now, somebody had asked a question the other day, you know, especially with the Unreal Engine, said, oh, you know, do you think with the, I said, listen, the Unreal Engine could have done the entire shot. As a matter of fact, it could have done all the shots. If not, it could have done the entire film. So especially the most powerful weapon, it seems, you know, in the gaming market right now is the Epic Unreal Engine. And believe me, I don't work for them, right? I know some of the guys there, but this is sort of something we're always working towards. So what's the easiest equation? Images on a screen, whether they're IP, DLP, LED, right, plasma, photochemical, it doesn't matter. They're a bathtub full of color ball bearings, so any image on the screen is possible. Now, one of the problems, you know, that I see, and I'm not trying to be like an old school guy to do with photochemical versus, you know, the Technicolor versus CMOS APS, right? But there's definitely a color lookup table, and there's a loss of certain things that are happening with the advent of technology, right? Like one of the most amazing things, when you look at old films like Alien, I've talked about that on LinkedIn a fair amount. You know, this was photochemical. It was using this beautiful thing that's been forgotten in movie making called pace. The pace of the film starts out very slow. You know, it's like a sine wave distribution, right? And as it increases, the intensity increases. It also uses this other great thing called implication. The idea of seeing stuff that you don't think you saw in the shadows by seeing bits of the creature. And I know I got a lot of trouble with the press because I said Jurassic was the beginning of the end of movie making because you could literally throw a creature on for 7 to 8, 10 seconds on the screen. So yes, it opened up the imagination of a lot of people, but in a lot of ways it didn't give your imagination. It was like a funeral for your imagination. So that's sort of where I'm going with this. You know, And obviously, 40 years ago, I used to write about digital humans. That's inevitable. Is it right? No, but we're driven by trying to replicate ourselves synthetically. So we got a bit of a problem. So that's sort of where I'm going with that.
That's fantastic. Oh yeah, that's fantastic. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna come back in there, Steve, if that's okay. And so if anyone has any questions, please do drop them in the window. But I'll start if I don't mind. That's amazing, and the work that you're right. Now we see. I'm always amazed when I see behind the scenes shots, if you like, of CG that's being done now, where I've seen a scene on screen and I've assumed that maybe the character or the monster is CG, and then I see the mesh and realize that in fact the entire scene was built on a computer. That's incredible, right? The way that things have come on, and as you mentioned there, Unreal. If I'm right, the Mandalorian, the virtual sets of the Mandalorian were all created in Unreal, right? That's
But it's a relativity-based thing, because the thing is that if you go all the way back, you go back to the caveman when they were doing depictions with burying blood on the side of the wall. That was not art. That was considered a story and was considered a snapshot of reality. And of course, the Italian frescoes come along and tied in with religion. All of a sudden, they become reality, right? And the cave paintings become expressionism or art. Then Lumiere comes along and starts laying looms down on top of things, and that becomes the scientific reality and norm. In other words, photoreal, okay? Or hyperreal. I love that term, hyperreal. What the hell does that mean? The best render in the world is nature. You ever seen you ever seen an image that nature renders? Unbelievable. So there's no real such thing as invention. It's really just archaeology in that we're uncovering what's already there. So these are all little homages to the way nature does things, right? Someone says, computer generated humans will never happen. Do you know how many times I heard that? When I heard you can't do digital dinosaurs, as a matter of fact, I heard you can't do digital dinosaurs from the experts at ILM. So every time you hear impossible, it makes it inevitable. So that's sort of the message. I'm not saying it's right, but us as humans, there's 5,600 different mammals, that are driven by eat, sleep, and fuck. And the next smartest mammal can't even make a pencil. So there's something wrong already. We've come up with this ability to manifest our will in a conducive mediums. Like we're not happy with nature's production schedule. We want to fly now, man. But we know in time metaphysical modifications will be satisfied, right? But so we exact our will in metal and fire, so we want to fly now. It's the same thing with this hoarding of longevity. Computer graphics is really a blueprint for the inevitable, which is we're trying to replicate ourselves synthetically with computer graphics because we essentially want to live forever. So does that mean, and every time somebody says, I don't think that will happen, I love that. It makes it inevitable. It means it is going to happen, right? So am I blabbing too much?
No, this is great. This is great.
I have my grandmother's teddy bear on the wall, right? So whenever he's looking over my shoulder, there's going to be trouble, okay?
Well, we got some questions from the audience, but I'd actually just like to take an opportunity and say, what are you working on right now, Stevie? Your company is Dreamview, right? But what are you working on?
Yeah, Dreamview. I'm helping out the guys with Dreamview. We just sort of identified a market. It's like I ended up directing a lot of live action commercials and a lot of sequences in film. So we thought, what? Why don't we just build this stuff in data, and go to companies like Wayfair and other companies and say, as opposed to doing studio shoots, we can build everything, clothes, and that's turned into be now we're getting demands to do humans.
Right.
So do I object against it? I always think that there's a warning tag on this stuff, kind of thing. It's inevitable, right? I'm more fascinated with, the way nature, to me, I'm just still a student of nature. I just, like just watching the way water goes down a drain or why a cat purrs, and studying, like math is like, as I've written a few times, if we write equations for like, Schwarzschild solution, right? Or force and stuff, we see these elaborate, R equals, 2 times GM over R squared, right, for the Schwarzschild solution. What nature sees is goo goo gaga poo poo pee pee, right? Nature doesn't give a crap. Math is just something we've used to try and describe what nature's already known forever.
Yeah.
So personally, I like blacksmithing. I've learned more from building in wood, and listening to how a cat purrs and stuff. Computer graphics was sort of, being an animator, I'm always interested in slowing time down, So dissecting time was a way to literally freeze time. So that's, sort of what I've been doing a little bit.
No, that's wonderful. We've got some questions here from folk, but it's interesting that you were saying that about with maths and computers trying to put numbers on things that nature already knows how to do. I'm kind of fascinated. It blew my mind when I said to somebody one time, I can't figure out how to do differential equations. I just don't have my numbers for that. And they said, but you can catch a ball, right? Because that's all you're doing. You're plotting the trajectory of a...
Absolutely. And it really is fascinating when you look at, like, how does this, like I wrote, gravity basically has a contract out on matter, right? And is to make it spherical. I'm going to make you spherical or I'm going to destroy you, right? Everything. You go to a field of sand and you look at a quartz bed. All the quartz has been worked in time and it's all spherical. That's what gravity, which is Einstein described as just being there. And he was an atheist, and he said it's of a divine nature. That's where he finally concluded it. So we're not going to figure this crap out. So you might as well run, so long as you don't hurt anybody, because you ain't going to figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, actually, on that note there, maybe this is relevant. There's a question from the audience. Someone asks, so when you're working on creating realistic animations, what's more important? Getting the movement right, the rhythm, the small features, the expressions, or are they all equally important?
They're all equally important, inevitably, but I mean, obviously it's a process, right? So one of the issues to do with movies that we do, even in the case of Jurassic, by example, I'm sorry to go back 25 years, but a T-Rex, okay, realistically, your brain does certain math about mass and gravity. It knows when it's not right. It can't really describe it. It's almost like how a musician doesn't understand why harmony works, but he knows or she knows when the note is right or wrong. So what is that inherent with the system? So in terms of human observation. So with human observation, you also recognize the same thing to do with mass and gravity, right? So when you're animating a character, even though you break the rules, a T-Rex would never chase anything unless it was of his own equivalent size. If a T-Rex could run, okay, that's another debate. Had hollow bones, a massive cooling system in its skull, it had a 1-ton head, okay? So do you think it would run? That would be a tremendous use of energy. So therefore, you look at the use of energy, therefore it says, oh, okay, well, if I use up all that energy, I have to be consuming food all the time. But if I have to run all the time, it's like the shark is not a bad example because it's just a killing machine, right? But it has a less amount of resistance because it's optimized for the water. Therefore, in answer to the question, when you're animating these large creatures, you're essentially bending the rule of physics to try and make it entertaining, all right? So that's where things become difficult, okay? So in terms of emulation of the way light operates, like stochastic ray tracing or subsurface scattering or any of the equations that have come up to do substitutions for basically what photon dispersal does, those are just a matter of time as well. You're already looking at a subjective medium, being a monitor, which is an incredibly powerful weapon. Like, I said in 2001 Space Odyssey, the second shot with the primates, are all fawning over this black monolith that represented all information. Guess what? Everything you're looking at is a black monolith, Arthur C. Clarke was right, all information comes off a stupid black monolith and we believe it. So there's an irony about that, So in answer to your question, personally, it was always to try and get the look of it. Okay, so like Lucas had come to me after we had finished on some of the Star Wars stuff, and he goes, oh, I have this Jar Jar Binks character. Now, one of my earliest comments was, okay, it looks really good as a still drawing, but when you add motion to it, essentially nature wouldn't make a character like this. It would not make it. It would not mutate something. It wouldn't give it elephant feet. So there is something to do with a Lamarckian theory versus a Darwinian theory to do with basically a force-driven modification to the body and a mutation-driven modification to the body. So all those things imposed, right? You become a critic, even though you're not really trained in it, but your human eye is basically trained to observe when the color doesn't look right and when the motion doesn't look right. Now, of course, movies have bent the rules, and I've been very critical about these fantastic camera moves all over for other superhero films, And I also mentioned one of the LinkedIn posts, I said, Spielberg had a great comment. Never put the camera where your eye wouldn't believe it. Great rule, okay? So it doesn't really matter in a way because eventually, this sounds crazy, right? Okay, but I'm not the only one to say it. But, your awareness in general is like a SIM card. You know, eventually when your body wears down, you're going to move your awareness into another medium, right? That has the ability to move around a little better, like a sports model, right? People say, oh, I don't think that'll ever happen. Thank you so much for saying that, because it makes it inevitable when you say no, right? No essentially means yes.
We're almost out of time, which is a real shame. We've got a couple of questions. I'm still going to bring these to you if I can.
Sure.
Someone, this is a technical question from Lee Walker, says, when CG started, we were all aware that rendering took ages, right?
Yeah.
Now, have faster computers changed that, or are we trying to do more complicated things so the rendering is still a hugely complicated process in the long run?
I think there's a synergy related to that. You know, I think that, in other words, does the technology drive, you know, the actual creative desire, or is it the creative desire that drives the technology? There seems to be a synergy growing with the two of them, because it's a blind curiosity. You know, like Chrome used to be elusive, okay, to do cubic reflection maps. Hair was elusive, water was elusive, right? And again, they're all studies of the way nature handles these things, right? So computational speed really seems to be secondary to the desire, because the one thing you can bank on is that NVIDIA is going to make a faster graphics chip, like the Titan V5, right? Kind of thing, right? So they're always going to make a chip that is quicker at calculating, and look at Mandalorian as an example, right? Real-time rendering. You know, I mean, whoever would have thought 10 years ago that real-time rendering ever would have been possible? Like in the Jurassic case, to give you an example, it was 24 hours a frame to calculate.
Wow, right.
And that was just the pre-processing to deal with all the assets prior to doing raster line, you know, computation. So in answer to the question, real-time, you know, like, I know, you know, in space-time continuum, space and time are supposed to be associated, right? I think that time is going to be disassociated with space eventually. You look at the certain neutrinos that can exist across the universe, one spins one. So basically time goes away. You know, time is really just a human form of measurement.
Right. Well, do you know what? On that note, I would happily chat to you for hours, because there's some really interesting topics that have come there. But we've got to press on to our next speaker, I'm afraid, Steve. So what I'd like to do right away is...
I really appreciate the time. And this is the first big Zoom thing that I've done. And I'm sorry I talked too much. And
No, not at all. It's been fascinating. And I'd love to invite you back to a future session as well. Maybe we'll do one in person, but definitely another one of these. And we'll have a chat with you about... we've got some content planned for our websites down the line that I think would be a real interest to you, actually, and about just the kind of...
That's a really great conference you guys are doing, and it's been very well organized from the onset. I'm very impressed.
Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us from California. Look.